It's like you can't swing a cheap mall-bought katana without running into a channel like this. One where the host spends endless hours of live streams, video essays, deeply angry at new comics, often convinced that some sinister hidden agenda is destroying culture, but also that nobody is reading those same comics and that they're also irrelevant. And while those two concepts certainly seem a little paradoxical and at odds with one another, imagine your surprise when they explain comics used to be different, or better, or apolitical, and many, if not most of us, are old enough to know that that simply wasn't really ever true. Everybody is entitled to an opinion. But is this helping anything? I mean, after a decade of Comicsgate, I can't think of one title from a mainstream publisher by a Comicsgater that's been successful. I can't even think of one that anyone from Comicsgate even liked, necessarily. So I have to ask if fandom isn't just propping comics up, but instead, is that fandom actually killing comics? Is it that comics didn't go bad? Did we? Stick around. We're going to talk about this. I'm Dan Umpton, and this is the Doomcast. First off, do me a favor, hit subscribe and the bell. I make about one of these videos a week. They're all great, so please don't miss even one. I also don't do videos about stuff that I hate. I just do videos about what I love. Except this. This is an exception, I guess. All right, if there's anything that nerds love more than things that they love, it's things that they hate. Nerds love to complain about everything. Always have. That's true. I remember having conversations in 6th grade about how Spider-Man wasn't reaching the peaks that it did with Maximum Carnage, and a few years before, how utterly stupid it was that Aunt May had been killed off, and that they would eventually bring her back. And of course they did eventually bring her back, I was right. I remember talking about the switchover of Marvel books from newsprint to deluxe glossy, and how we didn't like the new paper because it didn't look right anymore. And we were 12 and 13 years old, and complaining was what nerds did. And that's what we still do. That's nothing new. Then of course the internet happened, and some of the more negative of us went from sitting around a table at a comic book club or a con or gaming room at an LCS to complain online and disagree with random strangers. Some of us very vitriolically, regardless of who you are, you have to agree that if you remember the time before the internet made it possible to be a jerk remotely, people were much more civil, careful with their disagreement in general, even about comic books, even if they did disagree. But people have always disagreed, especially nerds. We just refined it into a disagreement forged in adamantium vibranium alloy. It's capable of absorbing any positivity. I keep coming back to Alan Moore's thoughts on modern comics, and I'm of two minds on it. Last year, he penned a scathing indictment of the state of modern comics and what fandom has done to multiple industries, especially the effect it's had on the political landscape and on the broader creative landscape, and I think that it's different than what he thinks. In some ways worse, in some ways it's vastly better. First, it is better for independent creators and independent comics. There's more small imprints, selling bigger runs relative to the big two than ever. You can build an online presence, and on social media you could break into the medium on the merit of what you created, practically, especially as a writer-artist combo from just about anywhere in the world. If you can go to cons, you can get traction. If you can get an online following, you can get traction. That means it's also better for fans finding that material. It's easier for them to engage directly with other fans positively. There's also plenty of very pleasant YouTube channels which summarize whole runs and whole characters and get people up to speed to jump onto a new point with an ongoing book. And of course, between social medias, you can find news and new books. You can usually update your pull list online if you have one. And if you don't, you can pirate comics from websites that will potentially try to infect your PC with ads for dick pills and hentai games. That aside, there are definitely positives to the rest of it. But like I say, there are huge downsides as well. Fandom grown on YouTube summaries seems to have become intractable to change. They've never read a single comic, or if they have, they've read fewer of them. They don't read comics now because the current YouTube videos say that they're currently terrible. They don't want new character development or new direction. They want the stories that they originally started with and how that made them feel. And this intractability kind of gets fed by channels, like we mentioned, with an orgiastic and fictitious period in which comics were better or apolitical or what have you. And let me tell you that while the art certainly was, at least in my opinion, sometimes it wasn't, the writing often wasn't either, and wasn't any less heavy-handed in terms of social issues from the 70s on. There was plenty of subversive subtext in the Silver Age, you just missed it. But that's death to a fandom, to stagnate like that, to be intractable. And if it's death to the fandom, it's death to the franchise as well. While you have no shortage of instances of nerds loving what they grew up with over modern work, every genre and every character has to change with time. And always does. If that change doesn't happen, or worse, fans are convinced to demand that it doesn't change. No writer or artist can innovate or create new material successfully. They can only appeal to an increasingly inconsistent sense of nostalgia. And within a generation, we're suddenly appealing to nostalgia for a time those current fans have never lived in at all. Certain fandoms seem more intractable than others. Superman fans are generally never satisfied, but most of them are very focused on Superman and media outside of comics, specifically with casting. It's been kind of an issue for about 15 years. Spider-Man's not dissimilar either, as most fans are focused on cartoons or movies or games, and often most dedicated fan outlets like the Spider-Man subreddit is almost universally negative on every Spider-Man comic book run, even before Dan Slott. People have been hating on Spider-Man writing for 25 years, then nostalgically lionizing the previous run, even though it's been, I'm thinking, Mark Waid, Zeb Wells, Dan Slott, Joe Kelly, then Slott, Spencer, then Wells again, and now Joe Kelly again, and fans have hated and retroactively loved every single one of those runs, which is bonkers. Star Wars might be the worst. Pretty much any average person likes Star Wars, and if you ask them if they like Star Wars, they'll say, sure, I like Luke Hawkwater and Greetums, Chewspit, and Hank Soda, and The Mandalorian. I like them all. We all do. You know who was absolutely flippin' hates Star Wars? Star Wars fans. Nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. In 1999, I hated the prequels. And I hated them until Revenge of the Sith. And then my mindset flips when I sort of started to like it due to the Clone Wars. Now, it's like the Clone Wars era and the prequels is the most popular era of Star Wars, I think, probably, bar none. There might be more Anakin fans than there are Luke Skywalker fans, and people vastly misunderstand that Vader is a cautionary tale and not a role model, but that's okay, it's fine. I'm glad people still at least like Star Wars. I joke, but all of these fandoms and many more have been sort of hijacked and tricked into hating the thing that they love, often by politicized YouTube. People that definitely have no agenda. You can usually identify them because their bio talks about how their husbands, even though maybe they've been caught for domestic abuse or something, or fathers, same, or Christians. I don't know, do Christians tend to hit their wives? I'm not sure. Anyway, they tend to have a real strong opinion on things like wokeness, which they explain is really just bad, heavy-handed writing. But it's funny because it always ends up being bad, heavy-handed writing when a woman or a black person shows up in their media. And believe me, bad, heavy-handed writing does exist. There's a lot of it out there, but that's not the point. These people don't like it because they recognize the power of stories to shape the narrative of a people, of people groups in general, and the soft power that it carries to tell our stories about the things that we value and bend the arc of social progress towards justice. When I say our stories, I'm talking about Americans broadly. Superman appealed to Americans through compassion backed by incredible power, a force that helped the weak and the powerless. Spider-Man appealed because his power gave him great responsibility to put himself in harm's way time after time, even when it made him miserable, and to hurt, to protect and uplift the people that were around him that he cared about. Star Wars reflects the American people's opposition to cruelty and oppression and tyranny and a deep desire for liberty and the truth. And with that commitment and courage, any system of oppression will eventually fail. That core appeal does have value. It doesn't mean I'm saying we need a gritty, dark Superman reboot or a happy Peter Parker or movies that sympathize with Imperials. You can certainly have a happy Peter Parker. You can certainly have a gritty Superman. You can certainly have media that includes a human story of a person who's in and complicit in a system of oppression, and or does that really well. But all these franchises and every other will grow and evolve and will change over time. Superman's family is going to grow. Peter's love interests are going to change. New Jedi and new eras are going to be created. A fandom stunted by being rooted in nostalgia can't grow. And what that's going to do is kill that fandom. Thanks everybody for watching. Part 2 coming out shortly. Thanks for checking this out. We'll see you again next week.